Okay, well, this is a real, kind of exciting occasion for me to be in a room with so many, leading representatives of the profession. It's a, actually, I'd much rather listen to you than listen to me. I know what I think. Maybe I can get part of the conversation started in a particular concrete direction. The first thing I want to say is I really want to welcome this initiative. This planning document that has been prepared goes well beyond the kinds of high-minded rhetoric that's generally deployed for ceremonial occasions of the bar. There is quite a lot of high-minded rhetoric here, but it's also accompanied by many quite specific concrete examples and proposals. Now, I want in these brief remarks to focus on the part of the report that deal with lawyers, law firms, and their corporate clients as citizens with public responsibilities, and then try to say something about how academics might fit into thinking about these public responsibilities. The parts dealing with the innovations in legal education to promote the more effective training of lawyers I largely agree with, especially those proposing more collaboration with practicing lawyers in complex problem-solving exercises. Harvard and my own school have taken many positive steps in this direction, and I agree with the report's conclusion that such enterprises could eventually redeem and justify the third year of law school. For me, the most encouraging and fascinating part of the report is its return to quite traditional notions of the responsibilities of legal professionals as citizens, while trying to update those traditions to take account of present opportunities and obstacles. Lawyers, as Tocqueville pointed out, for a long time staffed the country's policy elites and its political leadership class in and out of office, while in private practice and while on leave from it. More and more lawyers have come to share this leadership with other occupations, which is fine, but many of them have also abdicated leadership. At every stage of professional development and career, lawyers have tended to pass on responsibility for thinking about the social effects of their work to others. Law teachers, themselves refugees from practice or those who avoided it altogether, have been producing proposals for the reform of legal doctrines and institutions, which judges and policymakers might be able to act on, but have rarely addressed the role of practicing lawyers in implementing or undermining such reforms, averting their eyes from what their own graduates will be doing in practice and leaving their effective training for their jobs, both technical and ethical, to law firms. And law firm partners have used the ethics of client service and adversary advocacy to pass all responsibility for the determination of the ultimate ends of their work onto clients and their house counsel. And many house counsel, in turn, have carefully separated their domain of strictly legal matters from business decisions, or have framed their job simply as that of maximizing the short-term interests of their client, as defined by the managers from whom they take instructions, regardless of likely impacts on its long-term interests or those of communities, environments, employees, or the places where they do business. And in this world, sometimes everybody pretends to be just an agent, managers of shareholders, inside counsel of management, outside counsel of inside counsel, associates of partners. The notion that all these agents might have some discretion, some leeway to consider and to serve some interests beyond short-term profitability for their principals and for themselves seems both impractical and, in some views, improper. Impractical because of increased competition of business firms in product markets, law firms for clients and rainmaking partners, and in conceptions of the business firm that came to prevail after 1980, it's even improper for firms to serve any interests other than their shareholder welfare as measured by current stock prices, and in any case impossible because such a firm will become a takeover target or will have to replace its managers. And also impossible for law firms to question client managers' chosen ends for fear of losing business, or a star partner who recruited that client to another firm. Similarly, in some conceptions of ethical lawyering, it's improper for lawyers to consider any client's interests other than what the client's agents present as what the client immediately wants. And at its worst, this doctrine not only rationalizes passive acceptance of some pretty dodgy client practices, but active complicity. This document seems to me goes in a different direction. It assumes that lawyers can and should have some influence in helping to determine business clients' enlightened long-term interests and long-term goals, which necessarily presupposes that business firms will have some slack, some leeway to act on this advice. In this respect, is the document more realistic than the doctrine that business firms must follow the commands of the market or go under, and lawyers the commands of the client? Yes, in a way. But it's also, in some ways, more radical and almost utopian in a good way. It represents, it seems to me, a throwback to the managerialist conception of the business firm that emerged in the early 20th century and dominated both business and legal professional ideology in the post-war period of 1945 to about 1975. Now, I assume you invite a historian to this conference to talk about the past. The future is just beyond my competence. I leave that to specialists in the future. Early in the last century, prominent lawyers and business managers developed a complementary vision of their role as leaders in business organizations. Managers would seek and encourage their lawyers to give the advice that would help them seek to realize public values in the course of profit seeking. Or to put this another way, to be responsible corporate citizens, aware of potential conflicts their operations might provoke and harmful effects that might ensue, and to constructively collaborate to mitigate those conflicts and effects. I'm not going to try to present this was ever the ideology of a majority of the corporate elite or the bar. It was not. It was that of a minority, but a very interesting and influential minority. Louis Brandeis was one of the principal theorists and most effective practitioners of this role. His famous speech on the opportunity in the law is now remembered chiefly as a summons to public interest lawyering. Leading lawyers should act for the people as well as corporate clients. It also urges on lawyers a public interest-seeking role independent of their functions as representative of any client interests as policy statesmen. But its main purpose is to urge lawyers in their capacity as advisors to business to counsel managers to adopt business strategies that will increase the material welfare and practical capacity for democratic citizenship of their major constituencies, workers, local communities, clean and effective government. As is well known, Brandeis practiced what he preached, helped advising his client, the shoe manufacturer McIlwain, to help cure the evil of irregular employment while also making his plant more efficient by evening out production over the year, and advising the department store magnate Filene Brothers to quiet labor unrest by giving his workforce a larger participatory stake in managing the business. Brandeis was well aware that since lawyers act for clients, they can only perform the role if the client desires and authorizes it. So his other great call was to make business management a profession also. A professional rejects the notion that how much money is made is a fair measure of success, he says. A business must, of course, be profitable or go under, but while loss spells failure, large profits do not connote success. In business, excellence of performance manifests itself in the improvement of products, more perfect organization, eliminating friction as well as waste, bettering the conditions of the working men, developing their faculties and promoting their happiness, and the establishment of right relations with customers and the community. With the professionalization of business, he hoped more clients like Filene and McIlwain would step up to demand socially responsible legal advice. Now, the cause of professionalizing business was taken up by the newly founded Harvard Business School. The dedication address for Harvard Business School in 1927 was given by one of Ben's predecessors as general counsel of General Electric, Owen D. Young, who had since by then become chairman of the board. Young argued that as business organizations expanded and their products and operations grew more technical and specialized, corporations were no longer subject to local social sanctions and became laws unto themselves. Legislatures staffed with amateurs then drafted laws that expressed public outrage but were clumsy and ineffective. To avoid ill-judged regulation, business managers themselves needed to seek remedial measures that would help solve the problems their organizations had helped to create, externalities we now call these. The most important of these was the condition of labor. Working men, Young said, were squeezed to extract the last dollar of profit. Their family life was destroyed by excessive hours. Their entire community's welfare was disrupted when plants closed. To quote him, "No man with an inadequate wage is free. He is unable to meet his obligations to his friends, his society, and to himself." And Young said he can't be a human being, full human being, as long as he's thought of as a hired man. Young hopes for a day when labor will hire capital, business become democratic rather than autocratic, labor and management cooperate to yield the highest joint profit and divide it fairly. I remind you again, this is chairman of one of the largest corporations in the world in the conservative 1920s. This was not simply ceremonial rhetoric. Young came by his ethic by experience. I'm going to skip over all the things Young did at GE, although they're very interesting, to skip to the next point, which is that the Brandeis-Young model of business statesman guided by lawyer statesmen acquired new life in the managerialist era following World War II. Somewhat ironically, given Brandeis's own preferences for small competitive businesses over large ones, the headquarters of the model were large oligopolistic firms loosely associated in the Committee on Economic Development. It was imperfect competition that allowed them the leeway to act as the role of trustees responsible to various stakeholders. Capably advised by lawyer counselors, they thought autonomous professional management hierarchies would harmonize interests, developing wealth-enhancing technologies and business strategies. Enhanced productivity and living standards for everyone to avoid class conflict, cooperative negotiation with regulatory agencies, but also keeping overregulation at bay. Business associations like the committee accepted, though sometimes grudgingly, labor unions as the price of stability, supported tax hikes to reduce deficit and pay the costs of wars and infrastructure spending, full employment as a proper goal of fiscal and monetary policy, environmental protections, and even Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. They also perceived that there were some public goods that needed government action because firms that tried to provide them on their own would be at a competitive disadvantage, and thus the need for concerted action by business through associations like the Committee on Economic Development to lobby for public goods. And this era ended, as we all know, in the late 1960s and early 70s with the end of the long post-war boom, stagflation, the oil embargo, the rise of foreign competition. CED is replaced by the Business Roundtable, which starts out with a kind of managerialist slant, but eventually becomes a relatively conservative organization. This is accompanied, as all of you, of course, know, by different theories of the firm. Once the managers now accepted the new gospel, or at least rhetorically, whose John the Baptist had been Milton Friedman, that business had no responsibility except to make profits for its shareholders. And as management was now compensated largely with stock options, supposedly aligning their interests with shareholders, this came to mean no responsibility except to make as much money for themselves as possible. Business schools came to be ranked by the incomes and networking opportunities of their graduates, law firms by profits per partner. And eminent professors of corporate law explained that, in fact, managers were duty-bound not to observe the legal restraints at all if the cost of violating them was likely to be less than the benefits to shareholders. So that's why this conference, law firms, I think, incorporated some of this wealth-maximizing ethic through the channel of the advocacy ethic, and the responsible counseling ethic got thrown overboard in many firms as a useless anachronism. And that's why this conference is really interesting to me and potentially important. I think the moment would seem propitious, wouldn't it, for a revival of the professional leadership model articulated by Brandeis and Young. That is, that one of the functions of business leadership is to take account of the environment in which the corporation operates, to evaluate the effects of its operations on that environment and their likely consequences for the future health of the enterprise, especially potentially adverse ones such as sullen or rebellious workforces, dissatisfied customers, residents living downstream of polluters, and political reactions resulting in regulation, and then try to devise social welfare maximizing solutions that result in gains to all of the interested parties. The Young Brandeis view was that inattention to externalities invites social anger and extremely crude regulation, and that a socially conscious and responsible leadership can come up with superior and more flexible legal and non-legal regimes. And lawyers, they believed, were central to this process because their social and political experience was often much more extensive than their managers. They had served in important government posts as elected or appointed officials and were familiar with the ways of the capital. Now, lawyers, of course, could simply work directly for the reforms they see as necessary, as politicians or public interest lobbyists or members of legislative or administrative staff. But such reforms are less likely to stick unless encouraged and adopted by businesses themselves. The crucial element is a partnership with other firms and, as necessary, with governments. So Brandeis and Young were motivated in part by a stern sense of social duty of a kind one doesn't see that much of anymore, where generally if one wants to indulge in such a sense of duty, the only way to do it is to retire and become a philanthropist, like Andrew Carnegie or Bill Gates. But it was also inspired by the specter of labor discontent and class conflict, which, if unmediated, might lead to socialism or fascism. Now that there seems to be no abuse that labor cannot be made to fatalistically take in stride, that theme seems less urgent. But I doubt if income and wealth inequality can grow much wider without inviting the severe outbreaks of democratic discontent. I think they've been postponed for quite a while, but inevitably, I think people will not put up with having their standard of living deteriorate while those in the strata above them get so much better. And what is 10% unemployment lasting another decade, the continued escalation of healthcare costs way beyond what any other society has to pay for them, the exhaustion of energy sources, the potential destruction of the planet. There are certainly objects of public policy to which we need to pay attention, and and I know that some companies do pay attention to them. What I'm curious about is again the basic question of how much slack or latitude there is to pursue such policies. I would love to see something like a revival on the Committee of Economic Development, socially responsible firms getting together to urge the formulation of public policies that no firm can adopt on its own without losing a competitive advantage, but which would in turn improve living conditions for everyone. I see signs and evidences of such collaboration all over the place, but I wonder, how about it, guys? Can we get the old band back together? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. So Kim, come on up, and as Kim comes up, excuse me, we will have some time at the end, so if people are thinking about questions, we've got a microphone here, which will help just everybody hear you. So, but first, Kim Koopersmith, thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's a pretty amazing audience, so I mostly sat there thinking of gold in my ear, don't be humble, you're not so great. So I am really pretty honored to be presenting to this group who definitely knows quite a bit about the subject. I came to read the paper the old-fashioned way. I saw a press release about it. I asked our library about 3 times to print it out for me. Eventually, in our London office, they did, in fact, print it out to me, and they did it in an environmentally friendly way, which was to present it like this, stapled, and on both sides, which I happen to despise, even though I know it would be better for the environment. And when I went to read it, because I was determined to on a flight, it was done in a very interesting way. So page 5 then was followed by page 67. Then you flip the page. And it took me quite some time to understand the rhythm of this. But invoking my inner competencies beyond what I was trained, I did figure out that it was actually meant to be a book. And so when I got home, really, this I think is my crowning achievement, I took a corkscrew and put 2 holes in it and found some bakery string, and I have made my very own book of this article. So it's not for lack of effort, David, is what I'm trying to tell you. So I was drawn to the article because the topic was so unbelievably important and interesting to me. So I am a relatively new leader of a large law firm. I've been in the position for a little over 2 years. I do owe all of my success to taking the course that David taught about 8 years ago when I did not know what I was doing in the room. But in the course of developing into a leader of a large law firm, I have thought a great deal about the conflicting messages that I think are presented here. So I was elected into this role with a clear directive and understanding that my partners thought it was important that our law firm be operated much more like a business, that we needed to move into a new paradigm of how we relate to our clients, how we relate to each other. And I took on that challenge, but I also came to the role as probably one of the only people leading a law firm where my background in terms of the leadership roles I have held was in professional development, mentoring, how do we retain our associates, how do we make this a place that will be the destination for the very best law students. So I cared about pro bono. I hired our first pro bono partner. All of the things that kind of make you proud to be a lawyer were very much on my mind, and I was attempting to balance that with a mandate to make my law firm as much like a business as we possibly could. And how do you evaluate those two strong pulls in what seemed like very different directions? And I also considered the article from kind of the three places that I think of myself as a lawyer. One is as a leader of a law firm. The other is with a very, very deep commitment to public interest. So I'm just taking over as chair of Equal Justice Works from Laura Stein. I'm on the board of Her Justice. I'm involved in the Pro Bono Institute. These things really, really matter to me. And my third capacity as a lawyer is to be the mother of a third-year associate at a large law firm, actually, who is represented here today, and it really trying to understand and enjoy the perspective of someone who is 3 years out of law school as opposed to 30-plus years, believe it at that, out of law school. And really trying to take away from her experience what it would be like to be starting now and thinking and developing yourself as a lawyer and a citizen. So with that background, I guess I read the article, and I think we've already heard a few of the phrases. I will not sing for you, but I did find myself humming "If I Could Turn Back Time," because some of this did seem like how I grew up as a lawyer. I grew up with some partners who spent a huge amount of time just telling me why they were doing what they were doing, what the reasons were, what the client was interested in, having me meet the client in a way that I just don't think you can capture now. And I think the efforts to do so are the right efforts to be made because it was a different time then, and I think I am a way better lawyer for the investment that people made in those kinds of experiences that you can't really quantify in the current environment. But I also, kind of in assessing the feeling of, boy, this is a different world order. It's too hard to think about how we can make that work now. I actually think that in addition to the headwinds that we have all heard about, the rankings, the fact that my partners care a great deal about money, that lateral movement is just part of the order of the day, that technology makes you feel disconnected, that I can sit in my office and literally never get up and communicate with people purely over the computer without any human interaction, that people can work at home and you don't even know that they're at home. I mean, there's so many forces that make it hard to feel like you are part of an enterprise and part of an opportunity to contribute to society. But I actually, in preparing and really thinking a lot about this topic, I think, there's kind of the tragedy and comedy part. There's also some good things happening, and I would not be quite, I guess I think we're a bit further along than what may sound like we have so far to go in the article. I actually identified in what I know other firms are doing, and in some ways in what we're doing, what clients are doing, what public interest organizations are doing, and feeling like there is kind of an innovative spirit of embracing that we need to do things differently. So I guess my perspective on having some hope, and I'm not generally a glass half full girl, but I would say we just engaged in a long-term strategy exercise at our law firm. And so we put together various groups of leaders, and we also included about 15 people who we thought were good representatives of the next generation. And the goal was really a business goal. It was to think about beyond tomorrow, beyond this year, where do we need to be, what expertise do we need, how do we want want to deliver services? What could we do to improve our relationship with our clients? And what I found so amazing when I was thinking about talking here was the link between those initiatives, those efforts that we thought we needed to undertake to be a better law firm, and how much it overlaps with some of the goals that are articulated here in terms of being better citizens. So for almost every topic in our, as you could expect, breakout sessions, you have to do that in a long-term strategy meeting, but focused on talent, focused on delivery of legal services, focused on our client relationships. In every single breakout session, the theme that emerged was, how do we change our culture to encourage the kinds of actions that will make us a better law firm? And I think if we look at some of those conclusions, like we want our associate talent to feel connected to clients, to feel engaged in their business, to understand what the expectations are, all of those things that are good for us as a law firm, they're part of what I think will help to contribute to our associates feeling more engaged, feeling more of their role as a lawyer in a profession that is noble, that people chose for really, really good reasons. If you look at how we talk about our client delivery models, I mean, that sounds like it's all about the money, but really what it is not about the money. It's about making our clients and our law firm partners in how we do a better job. And I think if you take all of those themes in our analysis of what will make us a better law firm, I think you see a lot of reason for there to be hope that those same threads of what needs to be done better and differently at law firms, what needs to happen with client relationships, are actually melding in the right direction in terms of engaging younger lawyers in developing in the culture of large law firms much more of a sense of what I think existed when I went into this, which is that this is an intellectual profession. It's one where you get to contribute to society, you get to contribute to your profession, and how we can recapture that, I think, is in the ability of hopefully leaders and others in law firms, in law departments, taking that message and figuring out that you can communicate it as a business imperative, but also as what is good for society. So I also focused on, well, how could I do that, and what have I not done that I should be doing? And I thought, I kind of give myself a B+ for communicating the importance of this. And that's not a bad grade, but with grade inflation, it's not a great grade. And I guess my focus was, I have a huge advantage. Bob Strauss was the founder of our firm. So the message of public service, the message of being part of a broader ability to contribute to what we do, it's in the fabric of our firm, and yet I don't think that if I were to go to our younger associates and ask them about whether that's part of what drew them to the firm or what draws them to the profession, I don't think that I've done a good job of communicating that. And I remember years ago in one of the events that we do to try and bring people into the fabric of the firm, I think it was a new partner orientation, and we had Bob Strauss and Alan Feld and Vernon Jordan all talk, and they, kind of very humbly talked about, well, I ran the presidential transition team, I'm chair of the board of MD Anderson, I chair the board of the University of Michigan, I am part of the Iraq study group, and I could see the new partners just were like, this is such an interesting thing, but it seemed totally irrelevant to them. This seemed like they would be lucky to be on their co-op board. It just had no relevance. And I gave up, which was one of my thoughts as I was reading this paper. I thought, okay, we need to take this off the agenda. This just is not clicking at all. But that was the wrong message, because what we really need to do is take those kinds of experiences and make them absolutely part of what our young lawyers see as what can happen. And yes, not everybody is going to be able to become the chair of the presidential transition team, but creating a spirit of what we can do and how we can affect society, that needs to be much, much more in the mix. And I guess I have an additional kind of corollary to that. To the extent that we in law firms celebrate people going out and making a mark, we do it too much through the lens of, well, it's good for the firm. He's going to go to the SEC and then he'll come back, or he's going to be at the FCC and that's going to be great, or she's going to become a judge and then, you know, maybe she's not going to do that forever. That's not the right message. It's not just that it's good for the firm. It is much more that it is good for the country. It's good for the police department, that one of my partners becomes the general counsel. It's good for the country, for litigants to have smart, engaged people participating. And we need to do a much better job in law firms in communicating the citizenship part of this. Last point is just looking through the vantage point of our younger lawyers and what it is that clicks. I think that there's more happening than maybe people realize in terms of moving to a model of investment in our younger lawyers. Even if Brad Karp wasn't here, I would say, you know, my daughter has been engaged in knowing the client, in getting first chair opportunities, and having partners spend time with her. It's easy for me to say that about my own firm. I thought it would have more credibility if I said it about a different firm. I think we are getting, as law firms, that sense of commitment to making the next generation of lawyers want to do this for all of the good reasons that so many of us chose to do that. And that means making sure that pro bono matters, not because we want to say that we're on the American lawyer list of pro bono winners, but because it's a good experience, and equally importantly, it's the right thing to do. You are developing that interest in citizenship, in duty, in contribution. And so I guess in the place that I can make a difference, which is hopefully inspiring people who are starting out in the profession, and to the degree I can kind of shake my partners a little bit out of, it's not just all about the money. The role that I think I would play, and really that this article inspired me to, is to make sure that we do all we can to communicate that message. Communicate it in how people are remunerated, communicate it in how people are evaluated at all levels, communicate it in making sure that everyone in every part of our organization knows that the firm cares about what role lawyers play in society, not just in their own universe as participants, as partners or associates in a law firm. We will be a better profession if that message starts to be consistently communicated in law schools, in legal departments, in law firms, in the judiciary. I mean, we have a long way to go, but I really think that the change in the dynamic that we have all lived through is actually a huge opportunity, and I see that it is actually having that positive effect in having people rethink what it means to be a lawyer today, and that's a very good thing. And I applaud the authors of this for getting this conversation started in such an effective way. So, and I have 14 seconds. Very well done.
Thank you, Kim. So we have time for discussion. This is a discussion that's going to continue over lunch and for the rest of the day, but if you would come to approach the microphone, which is right there. Don't be shy. It's not a shy group. That would be a good idea. While someone is coming up to the microphone, which I'm quite confident someone will do, let me just say a second about what we're going to do afterwards, which is we wanted to reserve really, in some ways, the most important part of the day, not for discussion from the dais to the group, but for meaningful engagement among all the participants. So when we end here at 11:30 and this wall goes up, it really is actually quite an amazing thing to see. We're going to go back into the place where some of you were for coffee, and the room will be divided kind of into 4 areas, one for each of the 4 topics that we talked about that we will be discussing over lunch. So one is building a better relationship between companies, law firms, and law schools. That will be led by Laura Stein, who I can't help but say is my former student from my very first class, and I'm very proud of, but also is the general counsel of Clorox. The second is defining and sharing a responsibility for educating and training young lawyers. That'll be led by Deborah Rohde, one of the world's foremost authorities on the legal profession, who has a terrific new book that's about to come out on these issues. The third is on creative approaches to measuring value as well as economics. That will be led by Brad Karp, who was just mentioned earlier, and the managing partner of Paul Weiss. And finally, the fourth one on building careers as leaders in both public and private service, and that'll be led by former Deputy Attorney General and General Counsel of PepsiCo, Larry Thompson. So I was talking, and so giving space for you to talk. Thank you. I see, this is why those of us in the ABA's future commission stick together here. If you could just identify yourself, and you could direct it as a question or a comment. Really, this is a discussion. Judy,
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Judy Perry Martinez, and I'm chairing the ABA Commission on the Future of Delivery of Legal Services. The comments were wonderful, and to Kim, I wanted to ask a question about the role that you see in your clients, and particularly in your general counsel, internally within their corporations, and how they can elevate or at least get out the word about the good work that lawyers are doing. I had the pleasure of serving as a chief compliance officer at a major aerospace and defense company, and I know my general counsel one day was sitting at a corporate policy level meeting, and she was previewing some short video clips that were going to be shown to a corporate-wide vice president's meeting, and they were about engineers doing phenomenal work on satellites and other people doing great work in the intelligence industry. And she said, hey, wait a minute. What about doing a clip on what lawyers do for the world? And so we put together a wonderful clip about the pro bono program we have and about the work we do. And what I found at that vice president's meeting with from all around the globe was that people were turning and say, we didn't know our lawyers did these things. So my question to you is, how do you help general counsel in your partnerships with them, your work in equal justice, get that word out?
So, great question, and it's a happy question, because I think when I think about my role in Equal Justice Works, or I think about my role running the law firm, there is a huge amount of opportunity presently to actually make that both a business success and a citizenship success. So, for example, through Equal Justice Works, Akin, Gump, and Walmart has a medical legal partnership. We have an incredible fellow who is doing amazing work. The in-house legal department at Walmart all participated along with lawyers from our firm, and it is a way that then everyone is talking in a very different way than they used to about what in-house lawyers are doing. And we have a bunch of client partnerships on different pro bono projects, and I think it's a really helpful aspect of the in-house experience, and it works for law firms because we enjoy finding a way outside of just specific cases to be able to work together. So I think there's just an increasing amount of opportunity for there to be these kinds of partnerships, and I think it's a very effective way to get the word out and have people feel connected on both the law firm and the general counsel side.
Yeah, Bruce, please.
I feel like I'm at a scientific conference where they line up. I'm Bruce Kulick. I'm the general counsel of Merck. I'm also a former partner at Covington and Burling. And this fascinating discussion. I'm struck by a couple of things. One is the problem of collective action that Professor Gordon mentioned, and how it relates to law firm relationships with their clients. Bill Lee talked about the innovative program he has with Intel, and said, and we talk about fees at the end. Kim talked about the need that all firms have to make money and be successful, just as the corporate clients do. if you develop a stronger culture, I think, in the firms, that will help us overcome the tendency we have, and I guess I'll confess error. I often used to say, I hire lawyers, not law firms. That was because I didn't sense a strong culture of firms to be committed not just to the service of the clients, but to the broader professional aspirations that you mentioned, that Ben talks about. I want to get that advice from my firms. But when lawyers are moving from firm to firm chasing the dollar, and when I have to then chase dollars by screwing down the rates and things like that, that's not a good partnership. You know, sometimes I think there's this sort of Potemkin village view of alternate fee arrangements where you talk about them, but back at the business committee, you still have to justify them by realization and rates. So this is just a plea for a strengthening of firm cultures, which I think could lead to fewer lateral moves ultimately and stronger, longer-term relationships with your clients of the kind that Bill mentioned. So no question, but just a comment.
Let me just say on that dimension, I really do hope this is really one of the difficult questions I hope we really do spend some time talking about. And Roger Meltzer, I don't think Roger's here yet, but he's coming later on, the new global managing partner of DLA Piper, and he's written a very thoughtful comment on the article that really stresses the challenges that kind of mobility really puts to the kinds of issues that we have here. And I do think if we're going to make real progress on these issues, we have to really think about these issues in a very concrete and serious way. So thank you, Bruce. Yeah, please, Fred.
Thanks, David, and thanks to everybody at the CLP for, I'll echo what others have said, a fantastic paper and a great start today. I look forward to the rest of it. My name is Fred Heed, and I'm immediate past president of the Canadian Bar Association and Assistant General Counsel at Air Canada. Question, I think, for Ben, probably, but I'm delighted to see so many of my in-house colleagues in the room who may have some advice of this as well. One of the struggles I think we have as a profession, and it really crystallized for me moving in-house, was our relevance. There's a lot of how we deliver legal services doesn't really connect with the people that we're trying to reach. And I contrast that with the kinds of reactions we see post-Enron, for example. The papers were asking quite frequently, where were the lawyers? How could this happen? Where were the lawyers? So there's a thirst out there somewhere for what we do and what we contribute, very much, I think, in line with what the authors of the paper have described. Yet we struggle sometimes to find that seat at the table or at the inner ring around the table. And Ben, at GE, you must have faced a number of these kinds of conversations. How do we underline our relevance? How did you find ways to connect with the C-suite to make sure that those kind of values you're talking about in the paper were understood and appreciated by?
Very briefly, putting me aside for a second, I think one of the changes that's happened in corporations, this does go back to what Bob Hauer was talking about, is that business and society issues for many CEOs, for many companies, have become paramount. And so that the general counsel has now become as important as the CFO to the CEO and to the board, because these broad arrangements, whether it's the legislature, the regulators, the NGOs, whoever, whatever all the different constituents of the corporation are much more vocal. The scandals are greater, the integrity misses are more profound. So I guess it's not so much what we do, it's that the world has changed. And that therefore, at least I think for major global corporations, these business and society issues are as profound, important, consequential as the straight business issues. And so it's not what I do, it's not my smile or my networking skills, it's what the demands are of the company, what is properly seen, I think, by the right kind of visionary leaders. So I think to some extent it's really that answer, that this set of issues that we're talking about have become so front and center that in good companies there is a demand. You don't have to sort of, it's not a push, but there is a pull.
So Ben won't talk about him, but I can't resist that, you know, Ben has really been a leader in trying to articulate what that framework look like. And he has both written now a terrific book that many of you have seen called High Performance with High Integrity, which really thinks about these issues from the perspective of the company's leadership. But he's also, I know, working very hard on a book around general counsels and putting together many of the things that he's been writing on these issues. And I hope that one of the things we'll do as a continuation of this discussion is when that terrific book comes out, have an opportunity to really think about it and have general counsels and law firm leaders and others focus on that issue. I'm looking in the back of the room. Hakeem, are you about to give me the hook here? Is it about to go up? This is actually the coolest thing about this room, is the wall really does go up. So here's what I'd like you to do. Take your time. You can, take a break. The restrooms, we will exit this way when the wall comes up. The restrooms are around the corner to the right, but then make your way over, grab some lunch, and find one of the groups that you'd like to sit in. And let me just say that in addition to the terrific leaders, there will also be students at these groups. And the students will be both rapporteurs, but also will be there to give their perspective, as Kim said, on really these issues which are so critical to them. And we will then reconvene in this room at 2 o'clock sharp, and we will have reports from each of the working groups, and we really hope that you'll try to generate some concrete proposals that we can really talk about and share, and the students will also give their perspective. But please, one more hand for the terrific speakers we had and a great start to the day. Thank you. And that is really cool, isn't it?